Hello. Let's see. So, it's been, I think I always start the stream. It's been a wild journey. Oh, what the hell did I put on there? I did some kind of echo cancellation. Anyways, so, it's been like we're trying to find a signature that kind of reflects the idea of impact. And the idea of impact is to basically have a component that expresses its state using a reactive scope. And then there's many ways to do that. Vue does that in a certain way. We kind of gave up on React. We moved to Vue. Exploring Vue, we see that it just generally has bad documentation on JSX. It has bad typing with JSX. There's some differences in how with the fall through attributes, with how children work. There's no children typing, like, and so on and so on. But it was an important diversion, because now I have, yeah, and another thing that we got through, let's see, let me just do this in a new. So the other thing that we got from Vue before we kind of lean just straight into the define component signature. So define component had like this. So you kind of call this your component. So you would say counter here, and then you would have like your count. Oh, sorry. And then you will kind of return the UI here, right? But before that, we had an API that was more like create, well, we would do function setup, and then we would do function counter, and then we would do export to fall, create component, setup counter, right? And this was nice because you would kind of do your state management here, and then you would actually receive your state here, kind of adhering to this state. User interface is a function of state, right? It's a beautiful thing. But this creates this is a weird component, right? Because you get state first and then you get props. Unlike any other component that would potentially consume this state. So I discussed a bit with Adam, and that's the good thing. Like, I'm so deep into what's technically possible, being so deep into the code, so it's so nice to have someone that can just, what if we do this? What if we do this? And then I'm like super defensive. No, that's too difficult. That won't work. That's too magical. But then he mentioned something about consuming this setup state the same way here as you would do in any other component. And in any other component, you would use a hook, right? So you would say state and then like use counter. So what I've done now is actually make that possible. So you would do use counter, and that will be use store setup. And that's the other change. We're calling this a store because that's what people think about in React. Stores represent state management. It's an encapsulation of state management. So just doing this now, it actually works. But what if you want to make the count? But it's only yeah, and this is how it works. And if you want to make it available to any nested component, just export it, and it will just work. By default, these reactive components, they include a context provider. So they actually exposes the state by default. You can turn that off with an option, provide store. You can say false, or at least that's what I'm thinking now. Yes. But that's like, it doesn't get smoother than that, because by default, you never have to explicitly define your state. You just return something from your store. You can use a counter here. It will be typed here. It will be typed in either any nested component. And it's just like accessible by default, right? And then you can constrain it if you want to do that. Now, the other thing that's also been done now is that it's concurrent by default. Like, I had such a hard time like finding terminology for what does this lazy mounting mean, but I had to flip it around, because it's more that it's concurrent by default, meaning that resolving the store and the actual component happens in the render phase, right? But if you were to do this on will unmount, if you were to use this hook inside the store, which is also what I like now, is that it's very clear what can you use here and what can you use here. Anyways, so if you use this hook, by default, you'll get a warning. And that warning will tell you that we see that this component potentially has a side effect, because it's trying to clean up something, right? So we don't help you detect side effects by like running your code multiple times like React does. We kind of expect that you have control of your side effects, and then it's more, how does React need to run to handle these side effects? So basically, the warning will be, we have to implement this, but the warning will be something like, you're running an on-will unmount, which indicates that you want to clean up side effect. To do that, to guarantee that happening, the component can't be concurrent. So basically, you have to say concurrent false. Or if that on-will unmount has nothing to do with cleaning up a side effect, you can explicitly say concurrent true, and then the warning will go away, right? And this is an opportunity to teach people about render and commit phase and understand the trade-offs you're making in React when with concurrent mode, right? So with concurrent mode, you just can't have any side effects because there's no way to clean them up. Like side effects of the render phase. That's the point. But we want to do that because we want to be able to say interval equals set interval. That's so important to us because that has to do with our intention of writing code. Hello, Adam. Morning. I'm just going through the latest developments. Yeah, so that's basically it. The only thing that's like a little bit iffy still, I don't think it's a practical problem, but if you use this, you kind of dive into this kind of a rabbit hole of like by default, you won't have to deal with any of this. It will kind of just work. But as soon as you add this, you are forced into this rabbit hole of understanding concurrent mode, where you have to, like, we'll explain render and phase, render and commit phase, and that you have to have an understanding of what you're doing here. Are you cleaning up a side effect, or are you just like firing something related to an unmount? Which is things you should be conscious about as a developer. So I don't worry about that. But the thing that you also have to, like, there's a trade-off of using this, or a potential trade-off. And that is if you have an interval here, blah, 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 and you're clearing that interval here, what happens is that you can't use like const whatever theme, like use theme. You can't use that anymore. And that is because we're running this thing in a use layout effect instead. And the reason we do that is because that's the only way to both render a component before it mounts in the DOM and get a guarantee that it indeed will run, will unmount. That's the only way to do it. So that's kind of that's a thing I'm still reflecting on, because what we can do is we can just say that, okay, in these reactive components, you can't use hooks. We can do that. And then artificially block out hooks. We've already done that in this thing. So even though you don't have this on-wheel thing, we're going to block out the usage of hooks when this runs, regardless of it being concurrent or not. And then you have consistency. So if you want to use hooks, you have to do that in some nested component. And the only reason to really use hooks here is if you want to do like throw to suspense with a use hook, or like transition, or do ref stuff, and so on. Well, ref can actually be done here as well, but yeah. So I'm not 100% sure what to do about that yet. Yeah. It does do that in the React docs. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it's not about being able to do it or not. It's about how you write your code. Yeah, what do you mean we're not allowing it? Oh, like in concurrent mode, we're not allowing you to like clear the interval. Yeah, because it's like in React you can't, it's funny, because like in React you can't do this. That doesn't work in React. Like you can't define your interval as you would define an interval in any other coding context. You have to do this artificial use effect thing. Yeah. Yeah, and this is what I'm thinking here is like, okay, so if we were to say that hooks isn't supported, like the really important message here is that the reason we don't allow those hooks is to allow you to write code naturally. And the interval is maybe not the best. So it's a good example because it shows how much more overhead you have in React to express something so simple. But at the same time, you can make that interval work in React using hooks, right? There's another situation where you rather want to like instantiate new something, for example. That can't work in React by default if this new something has a side effect, because you can't, there's no way to dispose of it, because there's no guaranteed unmounting. So that's kind of a better example. But at the same time, that interval thing just represents everything that's like bad about simple intentions. But what I wanted to say is like, if we don't allow usage of hooks at all, that message needs to be very, very clear. Like the reason we prevent hooks is because we want to enable writing code like you write code in any other coding context for state management. And then if you want to use hooks, you can still do that in normal React context components, but you can't do it in reactive components. I think it's simpler to understand it because it's just consistent instead of just allowing hooks and then suddenly you have this on will unmount and then well, it's a trade-off. Like it's more consistent, but the message has to be really, really clear on why that has been chosen. And then you can do the other way around where you don't have to explain this that much. But then you have to explain why can I use hooks if I don't have on will unmount, and then I can use them. Sorry, I can use them if I don't have on will unmount, but I can't use them if I have on will unmount. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of the enabler for kind of just saying no hooks is that it's so simple to do a nested component. So my nested, like doing this, use counter, return my nested. That's all you have to do. And here it's safe to use hooks. Because this will always be concurrent. But this thing might not run concurrently based on you having a side effect or not. Or need to clean up a side effect or not. Yeah, I should have maybe explained that at the end. Like, that's kind of the beauty of this now. Is like you just have use counter, and then you can use it inside here to do layout stuff, manage state, do whatever you want. But if you want to use React hooks, you have to do that in a nested component. But you still have access to all the state. Or you could pass props, of course. It's really annoying that there's no like native way to jump off concurrent mode. Yeah, it's very much the controller. And like we didn't quite have this problem with like the last official API of Impact, because the store was just a context. But then you actually had to provide the context, right? So you would have to very artificially like inject these like store providers in your component tree. And it just feels really bad because a lot of these stores, they're tied to like a page. And then you would have like one component just to expose the store on the provider. And then you would have like page content as a single child of that to access the context. But that's the beauty here. It's like you don't have to think that way. You just have a page. It has some state. You use that state. And that state will also be available in any nested component. The trade-off though is, as we're discussing now, you can't use hooks because of concurrent mode. Or we can decide that by default you can, but if you have a side effect in your store, you can't use hooks in the related component. It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. But we don't have to decide on it now. We can kind of let it sink in. It's a very simple thing to change. So this is more building like the concept around it. And it's so annoying, right? Because even though you do, for example, on will unmount here, like it's overwhelmingly likely that it will run. There's like very special, like unique scenarios where it wouldn't run. That would be if you use a suspense boundary and the user hits the suspense boundary and navigates away from it, for example. Then it wouldn't trigger. Or you're using it with a list and transition, and you're typing very fast in the list, and it tries to build up the new list, and then the list items, each of the list items has its own store that has a side effect, right? And then it wouldn't guarantee that this would run. So it's like, if it happens, like it's very hard to know if it happens and what problems it causes. It's like impossible to debug it. Oh, sorry. Now I lost the thread, Adam. And if I did, would it not guarantee disposal? Yeah, like you can. Yeah, exactly. So you can take that risk. So the current API is like, you can say, so if you don't, if you have on will unmount, the idea is if you're using this hook and you haven't explicitly said if you want it to run concurrently or not, you have to do that. So here you can say, oh, fuck it, concurrent true. I'm gonna risk this thing not running because of concurrent mode. That's possible. Or I do false, but then you lose access to hooks in this scope. But you're guaranteed that this will run. It's very like it, but it's so sucky that you have to make that trade-off, right? And then, so what we could also do is like, we could just have one warning. So like if any store uses this, we'll give the warning once and just teach you that, so you don't actually, you're not forced to change anything. It will just have that warning when you open the app that you have the expectation that unmount is going to run. In concurrent mode, that might not run. You can fix this by like going in here and saying concurrent false, but not have access to any hooks here. Like that's like that. Yeah. So I think it's just a question of developer experience, really. Like personally, I've had this problem where concurrent mode has caused effects to not run, and we've had like lingering connections and stuff like that. So I guess that's why I'm so obsessed by this as well, is that there has to be like a very clear strategy on handling it. But yeah, I'm very open to like I wonder if what's it called? React prevent concurrent mode on a single component. This must be old. January 6th? Oh, React 17. Yeah, this is old stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense that the React would actually allow you to like jump out of concurrent mode for a single component. But yeah, I'm not sure what the best developer experience is here. It's just trade-offs. But maybe it's better to just have one warning. So if you start using on-will unmount, is a general warning that just states you're using this, you have this expectation that you need to run code as the components unmount. This cannot be guaranteed by React concurrent mode. And you should be conscious about this, either by just ignoring this warning and trust that concurrency won't cause this problem, which is like incredibly unlikely to happen if you're not using suspense or transition or that's the thing. I don't know all the scenarios where React can do this. It might just suddenly do it because of some random interactions by the user causing like heavy load related to the frame rate. Like this is the thing. It's like it's very, very deep technical how React will do this. But yeah, so you can choose to do that, but then the warning will still be there. Or you can go into those components and you can explicitly decide if you want to guarantee this hook to run or not. But yeah, still like, it's not often you need this, right? It's not often you do on-will unmount. It's very much related to if you're doing and I guess that's one thing that's kind of comparing this to use effect. It's like if you're doing a subscription, like use effect and concurrent mode handle subscriptions very well, and which is why we're talking about React just subscribing to state and not doing management of state, because the use effect will do that subscription thing. Well, they also have use sync external store to actually properly handle state syncing. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so if you're doing some subscription based thing, then you will have to drop out of concurrent mode to 100% guarantee that subscription is being cleaned up. But in concurrent mode, you could have used a use effect to do that subscription. Yeah, so if you have like set interval, you you can use a use effect for that. There's many things, anything subscription based, you can use use effect for. So you could like combine it. So for example, if you had like, if you just had state here, for example, observable count 0, and then you return like get count, return state.count, and then you had increase state.count plus plus, and then in let's remove this nested thing. So in here you would do like a use effect, but this is where I think it's problematic still. So you could do like interval, set interval, state.increase, and then return clear interval. Like you could do this, but the point isn't really that we're solving something you can't do in React. It's just making your code execute normal. Instead of having to think about, oh, I need this interval to be in the use effect, and it might run twice or many times, or it might not run at all, because the render phase has disposed of this component and the dependency array, and all of this stuff. So if you needed like access to something in here, you would have to do like state blah or whatever. You have the dependency arrays, and you have this implicit disposal. Like this isn't really on will unmount. Like you kind of think of it that way because of the empty dependency array, but it isn't true. Like conceptually, this isn't unmount. This is just, I have this effect running, as opposed to the mental model of, I'm instantiating this component, it should run an interval, when it unmounts, clear that interval. And then, what if you want like a nested store, a nested component to use? Well, I guess that isn't. Well, you're kind of splitting your state management between UI and actual state management. So you're leaning on, this is what happened at Code Sandbox. We were leaning on React to do effects. Like we were using this this reducer concept with state machines, but every time we needed to run some logic, we needed an effect to do that. So we kind of had some state management in the reducer, just the state, and then we had the effects running in the components. So it was like, it was decoupled, and it was very hard to reason about. So for example, here, you go into this file, how does the state management of this component work? Oh, that's the thing. And then you go in here, oh, so this is also part of the state management. Oh, the difference is that you inline all your code. Like you write your code like you would write code in any other context. Like you would never write create, when you just have a function that should create an interval, you would never like, oh, on mount we create that interval, something like that. No, you create your interval. Like you create everything you want to do. When it's like a constructor, right? If you have a class for state management, if you want an interval to run when that class is instantiated, you create that interval in the constructor. That's like our mental model. No, you don't need on did mount. It's, think of it as a class constructor. Yeah, but this is the challenge. This is like, we're so used to React runtime of having to think about instantiating and running things inside effects that when we don't have to do that anymore, even that becomes the overhead. But that's really the message. It's like this store, it's just like a class constructor or any like instantiation you do in any other code context. It's just that you can make certain code execute on the lifecycle of the component. So if I want to do on did mount, if I want to do something when the component actually mounts, like it's been mounted on the screen, then I can do that. Or when the component is going to be disposed of, I can run code related to that. But when it comes to just instantiating state management, it's just a function that's being called to instantiate the component. Yeah, so on did mount, it's basically So this code runs when component instantiates, and this is when component is visible on screen. On will unmount when component is unmounted. Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. But it's a good point, right? And maybe that's a problem. Like we call it cleanup in previous iteration of Impact, and maybe there's a point to this. Like, only reason I added on did mount was because we can, right? But there's a very strong separation between UI and state here. And you can argue that state isn't about the UI lifecycle. It's about the component lifecycle. So you could argue that the only thing this thing should have is cleanup. And then if you want to do something as the component mounts, you would use an effect for that, right? Do some UI stuff. And that could be calling into the state management. Yeah, I agree, Adam. Like, just talking through this, we're mixing terminology, right? Because will mount and did mount, this is UI related things. But then I definitely want to say that you need to have access to hooks by default. Yeah, exactly. It's not concerned with the UI. It's just concerned about when should it clean up. Yeah. Okay, let's change that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like this. That's a really good conclusion. Let's do that. And then if we're going to do that, then we're also kind of forced to allow you to use hooks in the counter. And then the story then is like, if you're using cleanup, which is also interesting, like now cleanup actually indicates you're cleaning up a side effect, right? Because it's called cleanup, not on will unmount. So if you have a cleanup, there's still this question like, should we like we have to warn you for sure. Like you're cleaning up and then you can decide, do you want to keep running it in concurrent mode and risk the cleanup not happening because of suspense and transitions and other concurrent features of React or concurrent behaviors of React? Or do you want to turn it off? But the trade-off then is that you can't use hooks. But it's almost like what you could also do here is like, if you have you could also take it further. Like you could say, if you have a store that uses cleanup, you're kind of not creating thinking. I just wish we could automate it. Yeah, so so the full so let's say you have a cleanup, and to guarantee that that cleanup runs, we have to, the component that's actually being created here, by default it actually returns null. So it doesn't return anything, but in its use layout effect, which actually runs before anything's rendered to the screen, we go in and we actually render the contents. Well, technically we don't render contents, but we flag it as, oh, by the way, you should actually render, like you are a blocking renderer. And it will run the component again, and now it will render, because now we've gone through like use layout effects, we know that it's going to mount, and then we render it again, and this is like a blocking render, but it's not like blocking in the sense that it will create a jank, but it's just blocking. And the problem is that, so to put it like this, what we could have done to ensure, this is interesting. So what we could have done is that if we made this an actual component, then it will work just fine. Because then you return null the first time, and then you return an actual nested component the next time. But then you have like, what you'll see in the React debugger is like, you have the actual like, the counter component, which is kind of orchestrating the store and the rendering of this component. And then you have the context provider, given that, yeah, you have the context provider because we default to exposing the store. And then you have the actual component. So you have like 3 components for this one component. Yeah, it's a good point. Like, and we should design this for the React Dev Tools, right? And you can still go in and say, I just wish we knew that you were going to call cleanup before. It's so annoying. It's so annoying that we don't have access to that, because we could dynamically choose to. So if you call cleanup, we'll mount this as a child component, and if not, we don't have to do that. And like if you export use counter, we add the context provider, but if you don't do that, we remove the context provider. Like, we know conceptually it's certain like what your intention is. We just can't access it. But yeah, again, as we talked about, like, these are much more controller types of components. This is not like how you're going to start defining your components. Like, the vast majority of your components are going to be completely normal components, right? React components. It's only when you need to manage state. And maybe now, especially if you're just embracing React, you're managing state in a lot of different components, but you probably also have that friction of like having to move state up all the time. While here you just immediately think, okay, I have this piece of UI, we'll put the state here, and then let's go and build up the components. And all of them have access to all the state for this section of the UI. So having that overhead of like that additional component rendering is not a big deal. Now, yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think we should do that. Like, as you stated, and again, like leaning on the hacky approach, it's like this should just work out of the box and just work consistently regardless of using cleanup or not. Our youngest, yeah, he's sick, and when I'm with him we just play PlayStation and he's relatively happy. But now my partner, she gets stressed sitting in front of the TV so much. But then he has a complete meltdown. I want ice cream. I want to play the PlayStation. Anyways, okay, so we're gonna remove on will unmount and on did mount. That's component concern, a UI concern. We're gonna have cleanup. We're gonna well, there's still a question of there's still a okay, but it doesn't completely solve it because there's still a question of concurrent mode, because we don't want all of these components to have this blocking nature, like using use layout effect and kind of initialize the component on use layout effect. So I would still, yeah. So God damn it. Okay, so to kind of bring all of this together, there's still this story of, okay, if you're using cleanup and you haven't configured how you want to handle concurrent mode, we're gonna warn you about that. But if you say no, I don't trust concurrent mode, so we're gonna do it false, which means that the actual component will have this blocking rendering use layout thing, but this thing runs as normal. You can still use hooks in here and do everything as normal, but you still have to explicitly say that no, I won't guarantee that this cleanup runs. And that's the annoying thing. Like, if we could just automate that. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Like, those are two different things, running this thing and running this thing. We can always run... can we? No, we can't do that. That's the whole problem. We can't run that in the render phase, because if we do that, we have to run this in the commit phase, because it's only in the commit phase that we can guarantee that this will run. Yeah, there has to be a way to automate it. So one way to like think about it is like you have props here, and then you have like disposer here, for example. So you could say like disposer add whatever. But then you would still have to have two different signatures for doing this. Is there something? Like, you could say create like disposable component, and then you would get a disposer. Like, you could do something like that. But it's still, it's a little bit. And then you have two kinds of components. I asked ChatGPT about like the opposite of concurrent. Like if this is, so you could have create component and create concurrent component, but you would typically create concurrent component. And what does it actually mean? So what if create component is concurrent by default, but then it would have to be create sync component. But that doesn't, or blocking component, but that it doesn't make any sense. I really want to just have one signature. Like the closest thing we've come to detecting this is like cleanup, or if we do have a disposable, I think we can look at the number of arguments for a function from the outside. So if I have function test foo, there's something called, or it used to be there. I don't think it's there anymore. Like you used to be able to look at the number of arguments for a function. Call that. Yeah, no, I don't think. I think it was removed in the language. I'm just gonna search for it. JavaScript, check function arguments length. From outside the function. That's kind of weird. Maybe I should ask from external scope. Yeah, length, right? You want. Oh. Yeah, exactly. So I think you mentioned this, Adam. So what we can do, we could check the length. And then if the length is 2, we would have a disposable there. Or cleanup or whatever. We would rather pass it in. And then we just check the length of the store. And if it's 2, like you might have to do this if you don't take any props, but that's fine. Yeah. And that's how we deal with it. Yeah. I think I like it. For how long have we streamed? Oh, I think I have to jump off shortly. Let's see how far we can push it. But yeah, that's definitely possible. And then we don't have that like concept of a hook inside the store like you have in the actual components, which I also like. Yeah. Yeah, with the context, yeah. Yeah. We should do this. I'm just trying, like there is like some crazy scenarios here. I wonder what happens if you define like, just to be like prepared for it. Yeah, then it's 0. But that would be exceptionally weird, right? If you did that. Yeah, I think I like it. Because we can still document and teach people about concurrent mode and why we go into this blocking render of the component when you use cleanup. And it's just to guarantee that it happens, right? Yeah, I think I like it. Let's see what we can get done with this. So impact React. I did some renaming stuff here, so it should be a bit cleaner. But let's remove, so we're gonna have cleanup, but we don't need to export that anymore. We're just gonna use it. And then we have this resolving store container. Yeah, all components. Yeah, so basically what we're going to implement is if the length is less than 2, we're just going to, we're not going to create that nested component, right? We're just going to call the counter and make it part of the actual reactive component. But if you have a length of 2, meaning you're doing a cleanup, we're actually going to render that as a nested component. So that you have access to hooks as normal. So store context is not a thing anymore. What we're gonna do here, we're just gonna do cleanup, and that's basically a CB of void, and it returns void. Nice. And then what we're gonna pass in here is just the cleanup. And here we're also just gonna pass the cleanup. Well, yeah. And if you're running, yeah, so here we can also check. This is also a good thing. It's like if we're doing SSR, if we're running this component on the server, and the length is 2, like you're using cleanup, we can just throw an error, because it basically means that you're creating side effects on your server, right? So for any reactive component you run on the server that actually cleans up side effects, that should be a use client component, only run on the client. Where are we? So let's see. So yeah, so we have this options thing that we don't need anymore. Let's drop that. And then we're gonna say requires concurrent, is concurrent, not is concurrent, but concurrent compatible is store.length is less than 2. That's an interesting thing. Try to interpret that without a comment. This is the most insane thing I've ever written. Oh, you mean the observer we pass in here? Yeah, so we have to, so I reflected on that. We have to pass in the actual like observer, like from MobX React Lite or wherever it comes from. And the reason is that they support concurrent. If I were to use like autorun from MobX or effect from signals to kind of do that observation in running the component, then I would have to manage the subscription, and I can't dispose of the description reliably because of concurrent mode. But these libraries, they handle it internally, this subscription. So Oh, yes, they're auto wrapped. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna do already here. It's like we're gonna create two different reactive components based on this. So if it's concurrent compatible, we're gonna do this thing. We're just immediately gonna create an observable function because we're gonna just call render in that thing. Okay. Let's come. I'm gonna do a review and comment everything at a later point. But yeah, so if concurrent compatible, so there's two ways for us to create. Like these run so differently now that I think it's better to just say reactive component. Yeah, any, and then we're gonna say. So we're gonna copy it because this is now a mix of both of them. Let's see. Yeah, it's true. I do not disagree. Okay, else reactive component equals. So we're gonna have just pasted the same code, and now we can go and fix it. So our oh, look at this. Let me just fix that quickly. So our first implementation is concurrent compatible. So we're going to use observer here. We're not going to have any of this blocking stuff. We still need parent, store container, children ref, all of this stuff. Store container ref, store ref, children ref. Maybe we can move. No, we can't move that. Okay. So we need to deduplicate some logic here. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we should change this. Maybe we should rather do this at the end. So we'll wrap it in observer at the end. I think that's better. Sorry. So we're dropping the observer here. I have a feeling it's going to be harder to read the code though. We'll see. So concurrent compatible observer reactive component or just reactive component. Yeah, I think this is going to be harder to understand reading the code because they execute so differently. But I'm reluctant to deduplicate all that logic. Okay, let's try this first and see where it gets us. Maybe it isn't as bad as I think. So this is really part of the concurrent rendering. Sorry, if it's not concurrent. Yeah, let's just see how it turns out. And then we go through this, configure store, blah, 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 blah. And then we have render UI. So here we go in. Yeah, so here we have to decide what we're going to do. So if it's concurrent compatible, we're just going to render. And if it's one thing that's interesting here is the props. Thinking. No, I think this is fine. Yeah. So if it's concurrent compatible, we're just going to render it. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, wait, we don't have to do the check here. Because the only thing that needs to be an observer. No, we have to do that. Yeah, sorry. No, we have to do that. Sorry. So this is the thing that's kind of confusing. Suddenly here, I make it an observer. So this would be... how are we going to do this? So this one's a little bit tricky, because here we actually want to... Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So what we want to do here is actually create element. And what we're creating is an observer of render. And it takes observable props current. Yeah, and then props children. Wow, this is interesting. Because here we're producing the result. Well, so this doesn't have to be created every time. Yeah, it's quite different. How are we gonna do this? Okay. What we can do is function render component, and it like takes some props, and then what we're gonna do is, well, this is also a thing. Like this can be two different implementation. Well, the thing is we don't want to create the component every time. We want to define the component up here. The one that we need to wrap observer around. Like if we want to, so if we are dropping out of concurrent mode, we want to actually create a component that's being rendered when we do render. But we shouldn't do that in the scope of the reconciliation, because then we're just going to create a new component every time. So we want to do it up here. So this is going to be our render component function, and it's going to be if we're concurrent compatible. This is basically just going to take props any, and then we're going to, well, I guess render. Yeah. And if not, we're gonna say, how the fuck is this gonna work? We need this reference to yeah, I think this needs to be separate. Like they render so differently that it just, like, I have to create this like non-concurrent component, and then if it's concurrent compatible we say null, or we're gonna like create element observer render. Oh, sorry, not create element, but this. Or, oh, wait a minute. Is it just this? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this is the tricky thing, because this is just a function call, while this is going to be a create element. So this is the thing I want to do up here. I want to define this observable render component. But that's only in not concurrent mode. So yeah, I can't reason about this. So I think we should split it up. it's gonna make it much more clear. So you have code for the concurrent component and you have code for the non-concurrent component, and you see clearly exactly what happens. What's kind of sucky is that most of it is similar. Well, that's the question, like how much is similar, how much is different. But all of this is exactly the same. Maybe that could be, maybe we could use hooks here. And then, yeah, that's interesting. Because all of this stuff, all of this, like configure store, is exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah. I think we can do that. That's a nice way to do it. And then we're gonna separate them, but we're gonna move most of it into a hook called like use configure store. And that has like configure store and all these like refs and everything. And then based on the component we're rendering, we're gonna choose when to call configure store. Let's try that. Function use configure store. So we're gonna move bloop. You're gonna go up here, and configure store is gonna go up there, like so. Okay, it needs to take props. That's fine. So that will be here. Let's just make it any. So we got the props there. And then we need to return configure store. Configure store. And then we also want to see what else we need access to. So we need the store container ref, observable props ref. Maybe we should just return all the refs. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be great. So we have configure store. We're going to return. Well, we don't need, what do we need? Observable props ref. We need store container ref, and we need store ref, I believe. Let's see what we're going to use from it. So what we're going to do instead is use config store const equals use config store. We pass it the props. What we're going to get here is observable props ref, store container ref, configure store. Do we need anything else? Yeah, store ref and store ref. Nice. Okay, so this is gonna be, we're now defining the blocking one because the other one's simpler. So now we can say, so we're just gonna create this observer component, or let's just call it component, would be observer render. So this is the actual component that we're going to render. And we have render UI. And now the result here is actually create element observer, this component. We're going to give it, where are the... And this is the thing. I don't think we actually need, like, we shouldn't. Like, we don't actually need, we can just pass it props here. Because we don't want the observable props here. Because we're using like memo around the parent. If the props change, The only thing I worry about is if you have a store which uses a prop that's observable and returns it as an observable, and then your component consumes that. No, I think this is fine. Yeah, and there's no, we're always going to provide the store. So let's just do that. Cool. And then we have is blocking. And then we're going to do, yeah, we're going to change store container ref. Store container. Where's the store container? Get resolving store container. There we go. So let's change this to cleanups. Let's remove this one. Rename register cleanup. Cleanups. Oh, sorry. Let's rename this. Rename register cleanup. Cleanup. That's fine. Then we don't have this anymore. Bloop. Yeah, so we don't have this. Let's see. So this would be, I think this would be if can use DOM is blocking and not is blocking. We return null. Oh, because I've been, yeah. Anyways, so this is not valid. So here we're gonna use layout effect. And then we configure the store. We set blocking to true. So if we can use a DOM and it's not blocking, but I'm not sure if we need can use DOM here because we're gonna throw an error on this if it's being used on the server. Is blocking, this is weird. Not is blocking, but is mounting or something. Will mount. Is blocking. Or is mounting. That's the thing. So we're gonna do this. I think we're gonna drop the can use DOM. So if it's mounting, so it starts out as true. Set is mounting. Because if it's mounting, we're gonna return null. And then we're not gonna do, yeah, this is bad stuff. So if it's not mounting anymore, cleanup. I think we're calling it cleanup, aren't we? Oh, come on, store container. Cleanup. Oh, come on. Let's look through it again. So this was a good idea. Use config store or configure store. And now we're defining the one that needs to wait until again, I don't like this flag. Like it's like it's true that it's like it is mounting. But it's more like will mount. As long as it will mount, we're gonna render the UI. That's the thing. Maybe we should just call it what it is. Rename set render component. Or basically this is the thing. Yeah. Ugh. Set resolved store. This is really what we're doing. We're resolving the store. Has resolved store. And this is false. And then every usage of has resolved store. So if has resolved store, we're gonna return the cleanup. Let's see, has resolved store. And it's really a ref that we're setting here, but because changing a ref doesn't update the component, we have to. So if it has not resolved store, we're returning null. Or we're gonna do this. And then we're gonna move this SSR stuff to this other one. Yes. So now what happens is it runs through the component first. It returns null because it hasn't resolved the store. And if for some reason React disposes of this, it won't run the layout effect. Nothing happens. Everything's fine. But if React moves to the commit phase, it's going to run use layout effect before it mounts anything in the DOM. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to, maybe we can even use, like it's more, so if, oh yeah, no, we can't really do, okay, maybe we can do this, has resolved store. So if it has resolved the store, we're going to return. It will make this use layout effect trigger again, but I think the code is more explicit. So if it has resolved the store, we're going to configure the store, and then we're going to render again. So this is the blocking nature. So React is about to mount this component to the DOM, but we are going in and configuring the store because now we know that it will actually mount. And by doing this, we're blocking the mounting in the DOM because we're triggering this component again. And React will respect that, run the component again. Now we have resolved the store, and we're going to render the UI. And the store is configured, and everything's ready. Oh yeah, and then we have the props. This is actually something we can do from inside the hook. What about this use effect? Could we have that inside the hook? Let's move this one first. So that would be Let's see. Oh, interesting. We don't need the observable props ref. Maybe. Let's see. Don't need it here at least. Oh, we don't need a store ref even. Nice. Oh, look at this. Beautiful. Oh, yeah, and this one should also go into the... Oh, yeah, that one should have been in here already. I just ignored it. Oh, sorry, not here, but up here. Let's see. Then we have render UI. I'm wondering if we can actually start moving this. Yeah, and we don't need this anymore. No, we still need this. Yeah, so we can drop the render UI function. And then we can do this instead. Look at this, beautiful. So the reason we push the resolvement of... Oh wait, we don't actually need it in this one, but we need it in the other one. Let's just shove it in here. The reason we did that, look at this, we can even now do this. Okay, so now this is definitely readable, right? So let's create a let reactive component, any, and then if, oh my god, let's put this further down so we kind of see them together. So if concurrent compatible, we're gonna do something else, or we're gonna do this thing. Reactive component. Okay. So if we're gonna do this, if it has a cleanup, right? What we're gonna do is we're gonna render our own component, and we're gonna delay the rendering of the UI until we have we know that we're actually going to mount, right? Because the cleanup requires us to have a guaranteed unmount. So what happens here is that this is false, and we can look at the effects after. So it always starts by doing null, but when it returns null in the render phase, React might dispose of this whole thing, and nothing has really happened. We haven't configured any stores, we haven't run anything. So that's perfectly fine, it's completely pure. But if React moves the commit phase, it's going to run this use layout effect. And when this use layout effect runs, it hasn't resolved the store, so it's gonna configure the store, which basically just executes it. Oh, I have to go. And then when we have resolved the store, we're going to set the resolved store to true, which is going to render the UI with everything, with our observing component, which has access to the store through the context. And our use effect is going to ensure that that we run the cleanup as we unmount using a use effect. And this, we know this will happen now because use layout effect ran. Perfect. But I have to I have to go, but I'm gonna implement the concurrent compatible one here, and then yeah, and then we're just going to return reactive component instead. and then everything's good in the world. This is super nice. This is gonna be super readable. I don't have time for another stream today, but I'm gonna finish this refactor, and then I'm gonna do a stream tomorrow where we're basically gonna test run all of this. And maybe I'll prepare some documentation updates as well. But yeah, super happy about where we're at. And I think this is gonna be a pretty awesome experience. Like, imagine just going in and being able to do this stuff without having to think about it. Yeah. Nice. Okay, cool. Thanks again, and bye for now.